Ty, ten program je vážně úžasný. Co? Ne, dobrý. To je to slyšel.
Truman, mám.
Jo, jestli tady jsou nějaký, kteří volí.
Jo, a ty jsi no, my jsme teď někdo. A takovou bychom počítali až zítra, ne? Dneska.
Měli bychom den na to se užít, co svůj lidi.
Učit se od banky 300 000.
No a co je s tím klíčem?
Nevím přesně, my za ním pojedeme sobotu. Nikam do tábora, kde je další. Taky deprese. No tak jako z deprese, jako deprese, nevíš, jako jestli to teda... Můžeme tam přijít a on mě hned může odsadit prostě nějakou sarkastickou hnusnou podnáku.
No jasně, já jsem tomu nedělal.
Nebo ho zveselíme tím, že jsem svěděl tvým.
No, ale...
Už to není Václavíček.
Ne, to je moc.
What?
Stay.
Surrender, surrender. Surrender.
No, ne, to surrender. To surrender.
No.
Stát.
I left. Yeah, I can't complete.
Co?
Mám kvalifikaci. Ten to dáme nejedu do vašeho, to nepojedu prostě.
Tak jsme napojení.
Už jsme jenom máme počkat chvilku, než...
Vlastně byste do vás stačí.
No, ne, on jako tak musel.
Ale jsem ráda, že by to... A takže už jste s ním mluvili, jo?
Perfektní video.
Jo?
To je fakt hrozně.
To jsem teď věděla. Jo?
Já jsem s ním už mluvil.
Jo?
A to mám vůbec.
Tak to je super. Ale tak si to já tadyhle toto budu na Instagramu, že hodím tadyhle poznámky na papír.
Hey, did you have any troubles getting in today?
Could you repeat that, please?
I'm sorry, did you have any trouble getting this technology?
No. It was easy, really. It's perfect, really.
Yeah, because your picture is really, really clear.
You're too, sure.
Hi, Michael. I would like to greet you and thank you for this conference. Hope everything will be okay. It is okay. And I would say that the connection is today really good, really good. The sound as well as the video is really good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the only thing I would love you, please, to encourage your students to speak slowly and distinguishedly, because for us, even if they are really good at English, so it is a slight problem for us to understand the different dialects. Do you understand?
Oh, yes, I understand completely. I think the person we had today, you've seen before, Jacob, he'll speak very slow. In fact, he's coming in the door right now.
Okay, and Michael, one more question. Do you record this video conference or shall I do it here?
Could you please repeat?
Do you record? Do you video?
I'm recording it now, but go ahead and record on your end too. That way we have a double one.
Okay, so you will have one.
Yes.
Record. Okay, so will it be posted somewhere on the website? Will it be posted on the website?
Well, that's the problem. I've been recording these, and you might want to record on your end as well. I can get perfect sound, but sometimes the picture doesn't record as well. That's a
I will
problem.
try to record
Go ahead and
it.
record on your end.
Right, okay.
And here's Jacob here too. Okay, just say he's putting his tie on for you.
Kde byl ten Štěndr, na kameru?
Hey, for the purposes of recorded history, tell us a little bit about your school.
What? I'm sorry, I did not understand you.
Yeah, just tell the audience a little bit about your school. Yeah.
We are a grammar school, academic type of school, as my teacher said. We are one of the 4 grammar schools in our town. Our town has about 100,000 citizens. It's the capital city of South Bohemia, and we got here a lovely weather, as you have in Texas.
Yeah, we had 80-degree weather the other day. It's supposed to get a little cooler today, but I guess that would be in centigrade in the 30s, or real close to it. It's been really hot the last couple days here.
Well, better than cold.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. We've missed several days of school this year for snow and stuff, so we kind of appreciate it. Either goes cold one day, then hot the next. It's we don't get winter time at all to speak of. Why don't you introduce your names, and then Jacob will introduce himself.
My name is Enos, and this is John.
Hey, it's very nice to meet both of you. My name's Jacob.
Hi, Jacob. Could you wait for a moment?
Oh, certainly.
All right, Jacob, shall we start?
Yes, we shall. I am ready to begin when y'all are. I believe you have the first speech.
Yes, we do. So, John, please.
Ještě vám nevím, protože já jsem dostat tadyhle tuhletu plus testy. Už to je.
Wait a second.
Ještě mám nastavené.
Okay, so the prosecution finds Harry Truman guilty of the genocide against the nation of Japan and crimes against humanity for using nuclear weapon against the people of Nagasaki and Hiroshima on 6th and 9th August 1945, killing in total 300,000 innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the war. Since then, the area around Nagasaki and Hiroshima has stayed contaminated. What is more, the material damage of these two industrial hearts of Japan turned into the dust is priceless. We would like to remind that the highest US diplomat stated in April 1945 that the Japanese were ready to surrender at the exact moment when the USSR joined the war against the last ally of Nazi Germany, that is Japan. Therefore, we are asking why Truman and his administrative did not wait for Soviets who took a considerable part in the war. One explanation could be that the US wanted to extend its political field of interest on the entire Japan. The US wanted to force Japan to surrender before USSR had been able to declare war on Japan and be able to participate in occupation of Japan. This situation is resembling the start of North Korean War. Many historical indication and analysis prove that Truman's decision was pragmatically cold and inhuman.
I will continue. Another version of this tragical event explaining this truly hard decision might be the Truman's effort to save as much US soldiers as he could. Japanese soldiers were always dedicated and kept fighting to the end without surrender, which made many US soldiers very depressed and demotivated. If this side of the story was true, why didn't he wait for Soviets? Japan wasn't threat anymore without its allies, and within the time going on, Japanese were weaker and weaker. This story also goes in contradiction with the study made on 15 June in which the US reckoned 40,000 lost troops at the most, not millions or hundreds of thousands as Truman and Churchill claimed later in order to justify the use of nuclear weapons after the war. That was pure propaganda and lied in the face of the whole disgusted society. Many historians also stand the opinion that using nuclear weapons and the attempt to intimidate the Soviet Union with the US firepower started Cold War and armed race. In the end, we have to summarize that the only Truman's motivation to use nuclear bombs was clearly political. He toward the social aspect as it was a paper and only thought how to expand the US diplomacy closer to Soviet Union. Therefore, the prosecution, as it was already said, finds Harry S. Truman guilty of the genocide against the nation of Japan and crimes against humanity for using nuclear weapons against the people of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We blame him that the area around Nagasaki and Hiroshima still stays contaminated, uninhabitable, and that this will stay his legacy to the future generations, especially for the thousands of disfigured children, thousands deaths caused by cancer, and hundreds of thousands forever ruined lives. That was all.
All right, thank you, and I'll begin my side. So first, my name is Jacob Shaw, and I'll be representing Harry S. Truman in this case today. We understand the serious nature of these charges, and we've mounted a serious challenge to each and every one of these alleged crimes the prosecution has brought against my client. First, I'd like to begin with a brief introduction and background of my client. President Truman was not even in the White House when many of the decisions about which took place to make, create, and drop the nuclear bombs on the Japanese cities had taken place. To fully understand our client, one must understand the two other relationships. One was the relationship that Franklin Roosevelt had with the American people, and the other was the relationship that Roosevelt had with Truman. Upon the death of FDR on April 12, 1945, the New York Times headline stated, "President Roosevelt is dead. Truman to continue policies. All cabinet members retain their posts." A nation that mourned the loss of the only man to be elected president for 4 times was looking for a man to continue the programs of FDR. President Truman was not picked to be president. He was not included in a great many decisions as vice president, and he sure wasn't in a political position to do anything that Roosevelt's team had already had in place. Therefore, the event of April 12th not only threw an unprepared person into the White House in Truman, It also cements the fact that nothing will be changed from the course that FDR has set our nation upon. The difficult position the prosecution finds itself in is that they try to weigh intentions on decisions that are made basically by others and by men who was thrust to a position who was told to continue the policies of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. After the fact about rumors of the Japanese atomic project and their ability to make an atomic bomb as well, what other decision would the president do? On the court, and the major portion of the prosecution's case is intent on the part of President Harry S. Truman. This intent can only be seen to the original documents on the first meeting that established the dates and targets for bombings in Japan. The information considered included previous damage, range of the bombers, and weather over the target. It is interesting to note that President Truman was not present at this meeting. His meeting was held on April 27th of 1945, just a matter of 2 weeks after President Truman had become president. According to President Truman's own personal notes, he was not informed of the nuclear bomb until May 21st, 1945. By that time, the Target Committee had met twice, and a third meeting was held on May 28, 1945. Most of the planning had been done before President Truman had even been told of the project. On May 31st, 1945, there was a meeting of the interim committee, and discussing the atomic bomb was the topic of the day-long meeting. In attendance with the Secretary of War, the director of the Manhattan Project, leading scientists, and leading generals. The meeting was called by Secretary of War Henry Stimson with approval of the president to discuss and to make decisions of the atomic bomb, its use both in war and in peace, and how to handle the public. You will note that experts at this time said the atomic bomb wouldn't be much different than a current bombing. Only a very large cloud, better visuals, a brilliant luminescence, as it has been called. For a second counter-argument, if the atomic bombs were not necessary, Japan was about to give up on its own. There are two related questions to consider in order to actually answer this question. The first was actually the amount of casualties that Truman and the Joint Chiefs of Staff believe would occur if the A-bomb was not used. The second is whether the Japanese government would have agreed to end the war if the A-bomb had not been dropped. The very latest scholarship has all but demolished revisionist accounts. Writing in the Pacific Historical Review in November of 1998, Sadao Asada offered his own thoroughly researched answer in a seminal article, The Shock of the Atomic Bomb and Japan's Decision to Surrender, a Reconsideration. This article reveals that the bomb and only the bomb galvanized Japan's peace party to take action necessary to terminate the Pacific War. What it accomplishes in a virtual tour de force is to correlate to day-by-day decisions of the Japanese government from August 6th through the 14th, in the context of how the use of the A-bomb worked to produce acceptance of the possible terms of surrender. So in essence, the arguments that our prosecution brought against us today are currently false. They assert the question rhetorically, why did Truman not wait for Russia to help? Well, for one, Russia was trying to imperialize Japan for itself. By us dropping the bombs, we stopped encroachment of Russia by itself for that imperialism. The second reason being is we actually waited and we thoroughly accounted 4 years. Japan attacked first in 41 with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. We did not start bombing until 1945, 4 years later. In that time, we continued to try to get peace agreements with Japan. We developed and lifted the bomb continually to make sure it was safe. It was even tested once. So therefore, it wasn't just a rash decision by Truman. It was a calculated decision that had already been made to go forth. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt and American people were already committed to this decision. It was a decision that was in the hearts of politics, as well as popular sovereignty in the people. And certainly Truman, an unprepared person in the White House, cannot do much to stop it at all. He can only make the only decision that he was informed to do and recommended to do by both of all people in his cabinet and again the American people. He talked about the fact that the bombs killed innocent lives. That's not always true, or in essence true 100% of the time. Japan was actually motivating or mobilizing its own people, giving them weapons, having them clear out fire lanes as a daily practice in case bombs were to be dropped, doing many things to make sure their people would be equipped if soldiers ever entered the mainlands of So therefore, not all innocent people were necessarily killed. Because again, Japan, they considered their own people worthy. In fact, when looking at writers who recounted tales of the bombings in Japan, such as John Hersey in his book Hiroshima, Japan's own people even considered it a total war. Just as the prosecution stated that Japan's army, Japan's men, their soldiers willing to fight until the very end. The people have the same mindset. That's a concept of faith and persistence. It's very fluent in the Japanese culture. It goes to show that people were expecting a total war. They're willing to fight until the very end as well, because they understood what it takes to win. Even after the bombs were dropped, people still wanted to keep fighting. They were astonished, shocked, and depressed at the accounts of their emperor, at the rulings, for them to give up, because no Japanese citizen wanted to give up. For these reasons, the fact that you cannot blame Truman, Japan had actually started this war on themselves and expected a total war. You cannot prosecute Harry S. Truman. And most, you can say he picked the lesser of two evils. For these reasons, thank you for your time, and please vote for the Defense Day. And that concludes our speech.
All right, could you give us a little bit of time?
Certainly. Did you want to have a second set of speeches and maybe some questions too, or?
No, we will prepare questions for you, and in a minute or two, we'll start asking you. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Já jsem zaslechl, že budu prošli se nelíbil, protože ten program on četla prostě až po schodí do což samozřejmě moc se od něj se dozvěděl, ale později šel věděl, on měl šok. Předtím byl viceprezident.
Pak tam říkal, že v podstatě čekali dlouho na to, že Japonsko jako řeší tu situaci, že se k tomu nebo to tam říkal, že prostě čekali dlouho, co teda se vidí, ale že prostě nebyla jiná cesta, že museli dopředu. Musel to řešit.
Jo, tak tady se znovu odvále na to, že invaze by stala 40 000. Když tak nemusel čekat.
A jestli jsem rozuměla, tak on říkal, že Japonci začali mobilizovat jejich lidi.
Jasně, ale to je jako, že jestliže ty vysoké americké diplomatické zdroje tvrdili, že jsou připraveni se vzdát, aby prostě do toho působili, tak to je prostě
ale tady pak musím zdůraznit, že oni 9. tady složení Nagasaki, oni fakt vstoupili. A prostě já bych řekl, že the bombing of Hiroshima left them cold. But why should the bombing of Nagasaki force them to surrender? Tak já si píšu to, proč jedna bomba je nebude.
Jo. All right, we have a first question. Hi there.
Hi, yes, this is my partner, Angel. He didn't read either of the speeches, but he'd be more than happy to help us answer questions and whatnot.
Okay, nice to meet you. All right, we have a first question. Here, John?
Yeah, my first question is, why Hiroshima bombing didn't force Japanese to surrender, but Nagasaki bombing did. We don't think that the bombing was the reason why they surrendered. The reason was that USSR joined the war on 9th August.
We weren't given an option to surrender.
Exactly when Americans bombed Nagasaki. And 5 days later, they surrendered already. Did you understand my question?
Go ahead. So then you'd be correct in saying that the bombs had some attraction to bring the USSR in for Russia. But even in that sense, that would still prove that the war was ended because the bombs were used. Regardless of the end result, the bombs still being used still caused Japan to surrender and ended World War II quicker than it would have been. But even in that sense, since we made Japan less desirable for Russia, since we made Japan kind of on their own, since we, in a sense, desolated them for Russia, and we got there first before Russia, not only did that delay a Cold War from happening, of course it infuriated Russia, but also stopped Russia from being imperialized. I'm sorry, from Japan being imperialized by Russia or the USSR at this time. Because, of course, the history between Russia and Japan is very shaky. They've had many wars in the past, dating back to the early 1900s. Even so. But even more so, looking back at the bombs, as Sadao Asada said in his article, A Japanese Citizen, he said that bombings did, in fact, cause the people and Hirohito to want to give up. As I said, the people wanted a total war. They're very persistent people. Even after the bombs were dropped, like you said, they wanted to keep going. They wanted to continue because they had that morale. But I think this proves our point that that morale would have been even greater or even harder to break if there was hand-to-hand combat. There was actual gunfire between troops. It was that we needed something larger, something bigger in the time being the atomic bomb. It was more of a fear tactic because it sparked fear in the hearts of the general and caused him to give up. It actually motivated him to our terms of peace because peace negotiations have been trying to go on for 4 years with the US and Japan. Like in that sense, even if you don't say to end the war, it motivated them to the terms of peace that we had already started. Would you mind if we got the second question?
Well, you just right now said that the bombs helped US and Japan, it helped Soviets to stay off the Japan, right? Because the US was there first, actually. US occupied and won the war on itself, even if at the date of the second bombing, the Soviet troops were landing in Japan. That means that you agree with our thesis that the only explanation of these events are clearly political with that the US wanted to extend its political field of interest. Is that right?
No, not at all. The first reason being, for all wars have some type of political gain, political loss for either country between the winning or, of course, the losing side. All wars come from some political side, and there has to be some political triumph and fail in each war. But second, the fact of the matter being that it was the best interest of Japan for the bombs to be used in regards to for the USSR and Russia. Because we could stop Russia from trying to imperialize and take over Japan, for example, that was much better for their country. And I'm sure Japanese citizens would agree with that today, any Japanese citizen.
So if they would agree, then it means that for the good of Japan, for US best will, killed 300,000 people, right? But because that's the result, you can't look at it on the other way. They bombed 2 cities for a good of Japan, killed 300,000 people. On bombings of Tokyo, killed bombings of Tokyo also killed 170,000 people. So was that for a goodwill of Japan, for a good future of Japan?
Well, it was the goodwill of every country involved in World War II, because first and foremost, it ended the war in both actual theaters, and Pacific theater as well as European theater. But furthermore, when looking at the use of the bombs, like I said earlier, it was the lesser of 2 evils. Either way, people were going to die. That's a facet of war. But what President Truman was looking at, and how it was recommended in his best decision by his cabinet and the American people, what they were looking at, in fact, how many lives were actually saved, how many generations were actually saved, how many children have been allowed to be born today because members of their generation weren't killed by warfare. Looking in essence, yes, people died, horrible deaths, but it was a much more preferable to, in fact, the millions of soldiers who would have died on both sides of the United States and Japan. We're actually saving lives on both sides. Because again, there's many people that are alive today that wouldn't have been. I think first and foremost, that's the most important thing to consider. How many lives were actually saved, not how many were killed.
I want to say that, as my colleagues said, firebombing of Tokyo left there 170,000 dead, and in Hiroshima there were 70,000 dead people either. So what I'm asking, why the government of Japan did not surrender when they saw how many Japanese died in your bombing, but when was bombed Nagasaki, they surrendered. I think that it was thanks to the Soviet Union that they joined the war in the same day as Nagasaki was bombed, that the Japan gave up.
Well, first and foremost, I'm not going to speculate on why Japan didn't or did give up when it did. I don't think that's fair on that part of the country. As we both agreed, they're a very persistent culture, a culture that fights to the very end. So I don't think a mere firebomb, as critical as it was at that time, was enough to stop them. I think we needed something more powerful and greater. Something, in fact, that Japan's atomic project was working on themselves, because they knew, and every country at this time, before the Cold War started, was working on an atomic project. They knew how devastating and how powerful these types of weapons would make your country. And when they knew whoever could use them would certainly decide a winner in any foreseen battle. And that's exactly what happened here.
You mentioned that that there was a preparing for a huge total war in Japan, that government was actually equipping civilians with guns, right? You reacted with that. You reacted on our thesis that those people had nothing to do with the war, right? And then I asked, how is it possible that in April 1945, US diplomats stated that the Japan was ready to surrender on exact time when the Soviets joined the war against Japan?
I want to say that they wanted to surrender because for them it was better to give up to Americans than to Soviets, because Soviets wouldn't keep monarchy there. they would probably execute the emperor and so on. So that was why they gave up.
Well, again, I would first and foremost say that I'm not going to speculate on exactly why they gave up, because regardless of what you say the end result reason was, it was still sparked from the bombs being used. And regardless if you see that as political reason or not, you can't deny that it saved millions of lives, ended the war quickly and efficiently, more quickly than it did, and delayed the start of a Cold War between the United States and Russia, who emerged as the biggest powers following this war. But again, in total war, as the Japanese culture has been accustomed to for centuries, nothing is off limits for attack. Nothing is too risque to be considered a facet of war. Literally everything is fair game in a total war. Total annihilation of another country. And even going further, we're looking at how Japan has been in the past, total wars. You can look at the rape of Nanking, or the way they treated their prisoners of war, when they've used children for swords practice, when they raped pregnant women, young girls, in the rape of Nanking, for example. You know, they would use these people as sword practice. And furthermore, if we're just talking about how evil a country can be, certainly Japan would be at the top of that list. But that's not what this argument is about, of course. The main factor is that Japan was expecting a total war, and they got a total war because they started a war. The fact that they lost isn't a sufficient reason to be convicting President Truman today. Because, for example, the bombs weren't enough to stop them, and they would have attacked the United States with their own atomic bomb, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. You wouldn't be able to convict Truman. In fact, the United States may still be recovering from that today. And that's certainly a world I would not like to live in for my country. I wouldn't want to live in a world where the United States is as dominant as it is today. I wouldn't want to live in a world where the enemy won World War II. I don't think you would want to live in a world like that either.
Já bych teď připomenul možná, jako jak ti Korejci, jak Truman, když říká, že on byl nevinný Truman k tomu, proč je dodal souhlas pro Korejskou.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you mind if we ask some questions now?
Of course, you can. Feel free.
My partner Angel is going to get to that.
Okay. On the meter, right? Japan attacked America first, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did Japan give America the chance to surrender?
Could you repeat that, please?
Did the Japanese give the Americans a chance to surrender in Pearl Harbor?
No.
So, if America hadn't responded to the attack on Pearl Harbor, that would make America seem weak, correct?
Tak podobný vojenský útok, kdy
My colleague here says that you have to compare an attack and a genocide. You know, genocide. These are two different. There are 300,000 lives here and millions of people whose lives were destroyed. And I don't know. I don't want to say that America. I don't know how many Americans died in Pearl Harbor, but I'm sorry, but you can't compare these numbers. You understand, right?
Well, take it into comparison to what could have happened in the future had the war continued and had both sides had soldiers fight. The numbers would have been much greater than 300,000. Also, like the bombs were tested in Bikini Atoll, right?
Could you repeat the last question? The last question, please. Could you repeat?
The bombs that we used were tested, correct?
Yes, they were.
Okay, so we knew the full strength and damage of what they were capable of before we dropped them on them.
Yes, but that's not, I would say, a compliment fact for you. It's, I would say, a disgusting truth that American administrative knew, and even that they used it. You know. That's not a defense. That's the thing why we prosecuted Truman. He knew what will it do, and still he used it.
Yes, he knew the consequences.
He knew the consequences.
Well, he knew what he thought would happen. He didn't know exactly what would happen, but he knew the effect it would have on the people because this was an unprecedented event. It'd been tested, but it hadn't been tested on people, on resources, on an actual living populace. But regardless, we knew there would be an ender to a war, and that's what we're looking at. But my question for you is, you hinted that war shouldn't be for political gain, and that because you said you asserted that because the atomic bombs were only for political gain, that's not a credible defense for President Harry S. Truman. But wasn't the bombing of Pearl Harbor political gain for Japan? And that was all politics, was it not?
This film was messed up. Člověk může být že nebyl, jestli to byla politická hra nebo ne. It was political game, but I always think that we don't have to behave as aggressors behaved. That was the situation in Czech Republic with the Germans. You know, the Germans slaughtered Czechs. And after the war, Czechs slaughtered Germans. And, you know, I criticize that because I think that if they used to behave somehow and slaughtered us, we shouldn't slaughter them because we will be on the same moral level as them. Do you understand?
You said after the war.
After the war.
Yeah.
That is at the end of the war, and that is even more horrible than in the while the war was still.
I see the justification that you're making that after the war y'all still attacked Germans, but this was before the war, as there was still tension between the countries. There was actual fighting going on between several countries, and there was a justification as opposed to what you're saying, where after the war you still attacked Germans.
Even then you talked about not wanting to be the aggressor, but Japan was the ultimate aggressor in this conflict. The United States had a proclamation of neutrality. We're not going to get involved in either side of the war. We're literally going to be neutral in this event. Of course, that was broken, but Japan broke our neutrality. We had no quarrel with them whatsoever.
I haven't said that the Japanese were not aggressors, or I haven't said that U.S. was aggressor.
You said that you didn't want aggressors, however, and you said there shouldn't be aggressors. But Japan was the aggressor in this argument. So you'd actually be saying the person you're trying to defend, Japan, would be aggressors, and would therefore not be correct in this argument. But you're saying that aggressors never be considered, they're never right, what your previous argument was.
I said that with the bombing, U.S. behaved as aggressor. For me, the aggressor is someone who begins a conflict.
All right. So,
who takes a first step with something. That was Japan.
Someone neutral.
That when Truman bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, he behaved even more worse than Japanese behaved.
so if America was to attack as the same that Pearl Harbor did, with a bunch of airplanes and shooting and stuff like that, wouldn't we just be chasing ourselves, like chasing our own tails? Because it'd be okay, we attack them in the same sense, therefore they have the right to attack us in the same sense, and it would just go back and forth, therefore losing even more people than we bombed after we were attacked.
and then we be considered the aggressors. To use an analogy, I think it's very similar to in school. You're sitting down having lunch, for example, enjoying yourself, and then someone comes up and punches you in the face. Obviously, you were neutral, and the person that attacked you first or hit you first was an aggressor. Much like in any conflict, if you're trying to be neutral and someone comes and attacks you, they're proclaimed the aggressor. Japan can't deny they not only started the conflict, but wanted to end it as well. Just because they couldn't end it does not mean the United States was any more aggressive than Japan. In fact, Japan can be considered more aggressive at every turn because, as we both agreed, as both parties have agreed today, Japan's army, as well as its people, willing to fight to the end. They wanted to fight a total war. And you cannot not be aggressive in a total war if you want to win, just like Japan did or wanted to win.
Já jsem tam na čem to chcete otočit, jestli tím, proč použil novou bombu, když dneska sami Američané
and the student rebellions in 1968 against USSR by Czechs, were they the aggressors? Were the Czechs the aggressors in that conflict because they were rebelling?
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't understand well.
Sorry. In 1968, when Czechs rebelled against USSR, were they the aggressors for rebelling against USSR?
Jo, byli, jako jestli byli v té době 68. Sověti agresoři vůči českému území. Jo, ale to jako nepoužívá.
Yes, they were, and but because yes, they were. They started something, you know.
So the Czechs were the aggressors, or the USSR was the aggressors? Well, as I recall in that conflict, the Czech rebelled against USSR. But who was the aggressor in that conflict?
The USSR was aggressor.
So then, synonymously, in this conflict, you would have to agree that Japan would be the aggressors. Because Japan attacked the United States. Just as the Czech rebellers were the victims in that conflict, the United States would also be the victim in this quarrel or conflict that happened. Because they were attacked first, they were put at a disadvantage, they had to suffer losses. And if we would have stood by and did nothing, not only would, as my partner said, would have made us look weak, that would have been a slap to the face of American life as we know it. It may have continued to war well beyond longer than any country was willing to go.
It would have taken away towards our credibility as a country and for all we fought for, exactly. For all we stand for.
And even in those 4 years, the United States continually tried to conduct peace treaties with Japan, and they continually threw them down and rendered them null and void. Japan was doing the same exact thing the United States was doing, trying to build up its own atomic project. So if the United States had not responded to this quarrel with militant strategy, and when it's in attack, but it's let it be, it would have been uncredible, weak, just morally deprived.
Most likely we would have been attacked again.
As well. And the second attack that I was alluding to, my partner just said, Japan may very well attack us with an atomic bomb after that. So what we would have had was, the United States would have been attacked twice, devastated, and the Axis powers may have very well won the war. And certainly that scenario is unpreferable to the scenario that actually happened.
All right, now I would like to ask you something. Can I?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Can I now ask you something?
Yes, that concludes our questions so far.
Okay. You tested the bombs. You knew that there would be radiation around the place where the bomb fell, and still you used the bombs. You knew how it will end up. Your colleague said that Americans didn't know how it would end. But I guess you don't have to be a professional physicist or a chemist, because an expert, you don't need to be expert to know that radiation will kill lots of people. You know, you could have used normal bombs, easily said.
Yes, but at that time, normal bombs wouldn't have been as effective. As we previously stated, literally every country involved in World War II, every dominating power who was involved in the war, was working on an atomic project.
The reason we did it was to make a statement. We could have used normal troops also, but that wouldn't have made a just statement as the atomic bombs did.
As you said, you're speaking on what we should have known the radiation to occur. Well, certainly Japan should have known that attacking the United States was a declaration of war. They had to have known that a unjustified attack on the United States was a declaration of war against our country. And they had to expect us to act. Just as, again, if the situation had been flipped, the United States had first attacked Japan, that would be also a declaration of war. That's known to both countries, because both countries would try to uphold their values.
You said that other types of weapons, than a nuclear weapon was not as effective as it should be. But how is it possible that I think that Nagasaki died 140,000 people, and in bombings of Tokyo, normal bombs from airplanes, bombers, died 170,000 people. Wasn't it just that the U.S. wanted to try somewhere in a practical way its newest weapon and to frighten the Soviet Union for the future, right?
All right. So Japan attacked us with the knowledge that we were going to attack back regardless. So they were more than prepared for us to attack on foot with soldiers. That's what they were ready for. They thought that we were going to attack on foot. So why set us up for failure and actually send troops over there for what they were already prepared for? That's why we had to use the atomic bomb.
In fact, the initial landing of troops was estimated to be far more severe than Normandy, one of the biggest belligerent days in World War II, one of the most heinous acts of troop warfare. And certainly, you can't justify more lives being lost in that aspect.
He wasn't even there. Truman also wasn't even there. He had no knowledge.
President Truman, the one at this time, the one you're prosecuting today, wasn't at any of the prior meetings that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was at to discuss the actual bombs. He wasn't informed into the decision until really at the last moment. In fact, if he would have even denied the decision, I'm sure he would have been repealed by Congress at that time, because literally everyone had made the decision to drop the bombs, for them to go forth with the bombs. It's one of the reasons why we had to take 4 years to calculate this event happening, to calculate how we would be able to do this, the effects of it, and if it was actually worth it. But furthermore, the reason we couldn't use real bombs because that was not feasible. Like I said, Japan was working on its own atomic project at that time. So if we'd have dropped regular bombs, regular attacks, then they could have dropped an atomic bomb on us. Even furthermore, these type of attacks are synonymous with troop warfare as well. Those go hand in hand, they're in tandem. Use those kind of attacks and more basic attacks, that would have showed that we were also going to engage in troop warfare. We would have been at a standstill, because we could have did that to each side. Both countries could have attacked each other that way. And again, both sides were looking to win. Countries found a way to win. And certainly, how can you unjustify a country wanting to win a war, especially when Japan was fighting a total war?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? And my friend has to leave, so.
All right, well, thank you for debating with us today.
But I'm sorry, I have to go, but it was nice to meet and to discuss with you.
Yes.
Right, thanks so much again for debating with us today.
Okay, then please, your question, please.
As my previous question was, certainly you can't justify, or how could you justify a country wanting to win in a war, let alone a total war. Is the goal of a war not to win?
You know, I think that I had a video conference with you, exactly with you, Jacob, before, and you said the same thing. Isn't a war just to be won or something like that? Yes, it is, of course. As you said, it is a political game, but always, I think that we are humans, and that we have to, you know, we have to behave somehow. You know. This is for me a genocide because these people just didn't expect it. They couldn't have defended themselves somehow. I know that war is about, you know, taking someone. It is about losing some lives. It is about taking someone's territory. But this is, I think. Why do you actually, let's say today, want so much? U.S. wants to stop Iran from making its own nuclear weapon. Why do you want it? Why do U.S. wants it? If you say that it's about every country's choice to do something, how to defend itself.
Well, for one, the United States, we don't want any country who's unstable with atomic bomb, which is why some countries in the Middle East have been declared zones of, I don't know the official term for it, but they've been declared zones where they cannot have military bombs. Yeah. Just like in North Korea, for example, we have sanctions on them to the effect of where they cannot have certain types of weapons because we can't trust them and no country can trust them.
It's for the safety of not only our country, but other countries too, who might be under the threat of an atomic bomb from Iran.
Exactly. And this in that token, since you never know what can happen, you have to be prepared.
You might call it think how to save other countries when you want to forbidden them to have nuclear weapons. But how can I be so sure that the U.S. is, you know, is a stabilized country? How could I know that one day you would elect some kind of maniac?
Well, you're right.
Who would do the same things?
You don't know that, and
yes, do you know a theory of nuclear war? Do you know? Have you heard about it?
Yes, I've heard that plenty of times. The theory of nuclear war, and you're right.
Theory, and it has to work, and we can't manage to make it if U.S. all the time. If the U.S. bans all other countries to have nuclear weapons, Israel have
weapons too.
Israel have nuclear weapons. Do you think that Israel is a stabilized country?
I agree. First and foremost, sorry to interrupt you a few times, but I agree that there is a such thing as a healthy skepticism. But no person in their own right would not want their country to not be the most dominant. They say they don't, then they're lying to themselves, and they're being unpatriotic towards their country. Because first and foremost, every citizen of their native country, they want their country to be most dominant. That's how they feel proud to be in that place, to be in their country. Furthermore, we're looking at the atomic bombs, for example. Even in the alliances we have with other countries, it's not sure that we are safe from those other countries and that we fully trust those other countries. You know, we have spy networks that go into other countries to conduct business over there. Even in World War II, there were many spies sent over in espionage to our country to view our Manhattan Project, to look and recreate our process on the atomic bombs. So yes, there's not a full amount of trust for any country, but every country wants to be the most dominant as they can. Just like in the Olympics, like we just had the Winter Olympics, every country wants to be as dominant as they can there. Every country wants to be, they want to be the winner. Because competition is one of the things that keeps the world going round and round and round, competing for resources, is what creates capitalism. It's what creates democracy among humanity by having so many competing theories and ideas. This has been how the world has worked for literally centuries from its inception. But furthermore, looking at the morality of it, going towards that kind of argument, stemming away from actual laws, why not say to look at the laws because you sort of declared it a genocide in Japan. But after the Holocaust in World War II, a council declared a genocide as having to have the actual intent to do it. And certainly Truman did not have the intent of slaughtering an entire Japanese population. Therefore, you cannot call that a genocide by the council who declared the definition of a genocide. But second, we're looking at the morality. The fact of just killing humans and trying to preserve human life, it didn't stop the Japanese from doing the rape of Nanking. It didn't stop them from using children as swords practice and raping pregnant women, as well as elderly women and very young girls. It didn't stop them from having deplorable acts against their own prisoners of war in many of their previous wars. The fact of the matter is, and cannot justify, is that the United States were the victims in this case. And they were just fighting back after being attacked. Just as any country would if they had the means to do so.
Takže já bych tam dala, že bych si to chtěl uzavřít a řekl bych za prvé, jo. A tam bych si trvala na svém, neměl právo to použít, když
No,
ne...
zase se budeme v tom kruhu.
Jasně, ale já bych to jako uzavřela,
No,
dala
jako
tam
já
nějaký
bych to klidně
fakta.
uzavřel. Myslím si, že si...
Did you have any further questions?
Yes, of course you can.
Oh, we didn't have any. I was just trying to clarify. Do you have any further questions?
Well, I don't have any more questions. I think it's a wicked circle, vicious circle.
It's a vicious
You know,
circle, because
we are
vy
getting
říkáte, že to bylo
round,
v
round,
pořádku, že to
round.
bylo.
You say that it was okay, I say it wasn't.
It really is. And I think it really does depend on the way you argue it here. But even this conversation right now about the circular logic here, it just goes forth and proves my argument that that's something, all this tension building up, that's something that President Truman had to live with for the rest of his life. Something he probably thought about every night before he went to bed. And I think that's enough. That pressure, that fear, and just moral contradiction within his body, that was enough. And a lot of men wouldn't have been able to take the rest of their life. I think that's enough to justify his actions. Because I know I would not be able to live with myself after that decision. I wouldn't be able to keep going.
Já
A lot of
si
people
myslím, že
wouldn't be able to.
neměl nikdy dopustit politici, aby i když jednají pod tlakem.
Well, he was a politician at high range, and every his decision has to be, you know, logically proved.
Well, I think that's what makes him a great politician. The fact that he was able to make tough decisions when he was receiving pressure from not only his own people, but other countries within the war who were starting their own atomic projects, from the direct opposing enemy, Japan, as well as his own cabinet, and from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's cabinet, and there's those people as well. I think considering the fact that he was able to make a tough and critical decision, the lesser of two evils, in a time where we're sure needed, that's what makes him a great politician. If there's no further questions, I think that truly concludes the debate today. I just want to thank you for your time today, and thank you so much for always a great debate. It's always just so hard preparing for this type of argument.
Thank you too. It is always, you know, a pleasure and a good, I always like these debates, and I can practice my language skills, and I don't know what to say.
Well, I just want to say your English is very fluent, better than some of the students we actually have in my school, to be perfectly honest. But we really like to know when you like to do this type of debate again, maybe on a different topic, maybe we switch sides. So when would you like to do this again?
Yes, I would like. Well, I'll tell it I will tell it to my teacher, and she will email your teacher.
All right. Well, we'll just keep in touch.
We can plan a new debate somewhere in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Yeah, I look forward to the next time, and thanks so much again. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Take care.